When Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877, he left behind $100 million. That number doesn't sound impressive until you do the math. $100 million in 1877 is worth roughly $230 billion today. That makes him, adjusting for inflation, one of the 2 or 3 wealthiest private individuals in all of American history, richer than Rockefeller, richer than Carnegie, richer than anyone walking the earth right now. And he did it without ever finishing school. He dropped out at 11 years old. He had no mentor, no inheritance, no family name that opened doors. His father was a struggling farmer and occasional boatman on Staten Island. His mother kept the house running on almost nothing. There was no trust fund, there was no plan B. There was just a boy who looked at the water one morning and decided he was going to own it. Most people tell this story as a rags to riches fairy tale, the scrappy kid who worked hard and made it big. The kind of story you put on a motivational poster and forget about by Tuesday. That story is wrong. Not because Vanderbilt didn't work hard. He did obsessively, relentlessly, for over 6 decades without stopping. But the reason he built what no one else could build wasn't effort. It wasn't grit. It wasn't luck, either. It was something most people never learn to see. He understood leverage before the word existed in finance. Let's start the story. Cornelius Vanderbilt was born in 1794 on Staten Island, New York, the third of 9 children. Staten Island at the time was not Manhattan. There were no grand houses, no theaters, no banks. There was farmland, muddy roads, salt water, and poverty. The family scraped out a living hauling goods and passengers across the harbor. By 11, Cornelius was already on the boats with his father, learning the tides, the currents, the price of everything. At 16, he made a deal with his mother. He told her he would plow and prepare their entire 6-acre farm, a job that typically took several weeks of back-breaking work, if she lent him $100. She agreed. He plowed the field in record time, borrowed the money, and used every cent to buy his first boat, a small, flat-bottomed Parioga. Nothing glamorous, nothing fast, just enough to start. He was 16 years old and already operating. Within the first year, he had paid his mother back every cent, plus interest, and pocketed a profit beyond that. Within 3 years, he was running ferry services across New York Harbor, competing against operators twice his age with 10 times his resources. He didn't win because he had better equipment. He didn't win because he had more experience. He won because he understood something they didn't. Price is a weapon. While other ferry operators maintained comfortable margins, Vanderbilt slashed his prices to the point where competing against him became financially ruinous. He wasn't trying to make money on each individual trip. He was trying to make the competition bleed long enough that they had no choice but to stop, and when they bled long enough, he bought them out, or they simply disappeared. He was 18 years old when he first figured this out. He spent the next 60 years refining it. By the time he was in his mid-20s, he had expanded his ferry operations across the entire New York harbor system. He wasn't just moving passengers, he was moving cargo, building trust with merchants, learning how commerce actually worked, not from books, but from weather and water and the exact moment a shipment had to arrive or be lost. He was building something without knowing what to call it. Then came the steamboats, and with them, the first real war. In 1817, the Hudson River was controlled by a legal monopoly granted by the state of New York to Robert Livingston and Robert Fulton. Anyone who wanted to run a steam-powered vessel on those waters needed their license. The price of entry was, by design, impossible for outsiders. The monopoly was legal, it was protected, and it was, from the perspective of everyone who held it, permanent. Vanderbilt went to work for a man named Thomas Gibbons, who was one of the few willing to fight it in court. Vanderbilt ran the steamboats flagrantly, deliberately, in open defiance of the monopoly, while Gibbons funded the legal battle. State authorities came after them. Vanderbilt kept running. His wife Elizabeth reportedly hid him from officers on more than one occasion. He treated the whole thing like a game he already knew the outcome of. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. Gibbons versus Ogden, 1824. The ruling came down clearly. States could not regulate interstate commerce. The Hudson River monopoly was broken. Overnight, the river was open. And Vanderbilt, who had spent years learning every inch of that water while the lawyers argued in Washington, was perfectly positioned. He didn't just enter the market, he dominated it within months. He cut fares. He improved speed. He poached customers from operators who had no idea what was coming. He was methodical about it, almost clinical. He didn't hate his competitors. He just had no use for them. Sentiment was expensive. Vanderbilt had learned early that expensive things slow you down. Most people, when they see an obstacle, ask, "How do I get around this?" Vanderbilt asked something different. He asked, "Who benefits if this obstacle disappears?" And then he found a way to be that person. This is the part of the story that every motivational poster skips. He didn't grind his way to the top. He redesigned the terrain. Most people watching this will never build what Vanderbilt built. Not because the resources aren't there, but because they never learned to think about money the way he did. This is the part that changes how you think about money. The game was never about working harder, it was about understanding the system and building leverage inside it. That's what the financial restart system teaches, not how to grind more, how to build the foundation that works while you sleep. The difference between Warren and everyone else wasn't effort, it was structure. Get the book link in the description, and if you want to go deeper, check the pinned comment below. By the time he was in his 40s, Vanderbilt controlled a significant portion of steamship traffic on the East Coast. He had made more money than most men see in 10 lifetimes. He could have stopped. Instead, he pivoted to railroads. This is where most people get the timeline completely wrong. Vanderbilt didn't enter railroads as a young man hungry for his first fortune. He entered them in his late 60s. Most men at that age are thinking about slowing down. He was thinking about the next monopoly. He started by acquiring the New York and Harlem Railroad in 1862. At the time, the Harlem Line was considered nearly worthless, a short, poorly managed commuter route that serious investors ignored. Vanderbilt saw it differently. He saw it as a foothold. Then came the Hudson River Railroad. Then, through a series of aggressive stock maneuvers that left Wall Street speechless, including a legendary short squeeze on the Harlem Line that reportedly cost a group of city aldermen and state legislators their entire fortunes after they tried to manipulate the stock against him. He acquired the New York Central, one of the most important rail lines in the country. He had been swindled before. He had been cheated in deals, outmaneuvered in courts, ambushed by politicians who thought they could take advantage of a man without a formal education. Every single time he came back. Not with lawyers, not with public complaints. With money and patience, and a memory that never forgot a single name. He didn't just buy these railroads. He rebuilt them from the ground up. He standardized the track gauges across different lines so that trains could run continuously without switching cars at every junction, something never done at scale before. He upgraded equipment. He created through service from New York City all the way to Chicago, connecting the East Coast to the interior of the country in a way that simply hadn't existed. And then he held the city of New York hostage. In 1867, Vanderbilt had a dispute with the city over bridge access into Manhattan. The city refused to cooperate, so Vanderbilt stopped all freight deliveries into the island. Every incoming train stopped at the river's edge. Goods piled up on the New Jersey side. Merchants screamed. The city came back to the table within weeks. He was 73 years old when he pulled that move. By his early 70s, he had built a system so essential to the functioning of New York City that he could shut it down and win a negotiation with the government, not because he commanded any office or army, but because he owned the infrastructure that everything else depended on. While everyone else was building outward, Vanderbilt was building control of the harbor, the river, the railroad into Manhattan. 3 different industries, 3 different eras, the same underlying logic each time. People who met Vanderbilt in his later years described a man who was calm, blunt, and almost completely unimpressed by his own success. He didn't collect trophies. He didn't give speeches about his philosophy. He didn't write a memoir. He went to the office, made decisions, and went home. He played cards with friends on weekends. He was, by most accounts, extraordinarily difficult to read because he never seemed to need anything from anyone, which made him nearly impossible to manipulate. That too was a kind of leverage. Most powerful men of his era needed to be seen. They built mansions on Fifth Avenue specifically to be noticed. They gave to universities and put their names on the buildings. They cultivated reputations the way other men cultivated investments. Vanderbilt did almost none of that. He built Grand Central Depot in his final years, a terminal that would eventually become one of the most recognizable buildings in the world. He didn't name it after himself. He named it after the railroad. He wasn't building a legacy. He was building a system. There is a difference, and most people never understand what it is. A legacy is about the man. A system is about the mechanism. One dies when you die. The other keeps running. There's a version of ambition that burns itself out chasing results, that spends 40 years grinding, sacrificing, pushing, and ends with a man who has worked his entire life and left behind nothing that survives him. No structure, no mechanism, just effort and the memory of effort, and eventually not even that. And then there's the version Vanderbilt practiced, the kind that builds structures, not achievements, the kind that keeps working long after you've stopped. When he died, his son William doubled the family fortune within 8 years, not because William was a genius, but because the system his father built didn't need Cornelius anymore. Think about what that means for a moment. The most powerful man in American finance built something so well designed that his own presence became optional. He made himself replaceable on purpose, not out of humility, out of engineering. A man who needed to be there every day had built a job. Vanderbilt built a machine. That was the whole point. It was always the whole point. He had no education, he had no connections, he had no map. He had something more useful than any of those things. He knew where the water went.